I had to get comfortable with, the basics of how those kinds of deals worked as well. And actually, thankfully, we've done really well on them. So we own both of those assets now too, the other two, and they're profitable, healthy assets. Mm-hmm. And the key there was that we got in at a low enough price to where we could make some mistakes and still, have profitable outcomes. But yeah, so first few deals for us were really, reflective of the fact that in a lot of ways we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. We kind of didn't know what we were doing. But again, I would say we took action. We, started to build a portfolio, and it's worked out for the best, just because we were in the game.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to Weiss Advice. I am your host, as always, Yona Weiss. With me today, I have Daniel Croce. What is going on, my friend?
Not too much. Thanks so much for having me. Good to see you. Love to be here.
I'm very grateful that you took the time out today to spend a little time with us and our audience to get to know you a little bit more and kind of learn a little bit about your backstory. You have, I wouldn't say a unique story. Everyone's story is unique, but in the terms of the real estate investment, it is quite different from a lot of the people that have been on this show. So if you're listening to this, buckle up, because you're going to be on for a ride that you may not have heard before. So Dan, I'd love to just kind of get a little bit of the backstory. I mean, I'd like to give a little bit of a context to our listeners before we get in, which, I like to do. You're the co-founder of Birgo Capital, which is a vertically integrated real estate investment company. Now you have over 2,000 units, right? That's over $200 million of real estate assets under management. And it is an incredible thing when you talk about creating a company, creating a vision, and kind of moving with that. But I want to kind of go back to your humble beginnings, if you will, to just get an idea of how this came about, how this started.
Yep.
When was this? And give me a little bit of background until how you did this. And the reason why I want to say that is because, as I mentioned at the very beginning, it's a little bit different, right? You have a lot of people, we've had guests on the show that are kind of syndicators, maybe came from a different career and went into real estate with some partners, syndicating deals. You did it a much different way, as far as I understand. So I'd just love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Happy to talk you through that. So in a lot of ways, it is pretty distinct from, I think, the way that a lot of people get into this space. And there are also some similarities. So for me, it's kind of a funny story. What got me most interested in real estate to begin with was I somehow convinced my wife when we got married in 2011, it's going to be our 10-year anniversary here coming up soon, but I convinced her to move into my brother's third floor of his house, along with my best friend from high school and one of my fraternity brothers from college. So she was living in this house with a bunch of guys. We did have our own, bathroom and stuff on the third floor, but eventually after a year of that, she was like, absolutely no more. So we are not going to do this. I was paying my brother $200 a month. And, so I had to actually look at the market and figure out what it was going to be like to, rent my own apartment. And in the neighborhood that I was in, this is in Pittsburgh, in the east end of Pittsburgh, I just did the quick math and realized that it was going to be much cheaper for me on a monthly basis to buy a 3-bedroom house than it was to rent a 1-bedroom apartment. Wow. And so I just, I had this light bulb moment and realized, okay, it's really good to be on the landlord side of the equation. Mm-hmm. So bought a house. But then I thought, well, I also really don't like my job. And so if somebody is, collecting checks, that's passive income. I've always been interested in personal finance. So thinking about, passive income, but in a real estate sense, it really just piqued my interest. And so I bought a house down the street from mine, got that first rent check, and the rest was history for me. I was hooked. So immediately, just doing the quick math, it's funny. I remember the details. So I bought this house for $19,900. It was a 2-bedroom house. It was being rented for $600 a month. And I put $5,000 down and I borrowed on a 10-year note. The rest, my mortgage payment was $162 a month.
Wow.
So, the math works. I mean, for me, it actually started in much the same way that it does for a lot of people, in the sense that I just started buying property myself as resources allowed. But I was professionally managing money in some unique strategies. So I was not professionally investing in real estate, but I actually was a fund manager. So I had gone out and raised some capital from people that I knew, mostly sort of friends and family, not a whole lot, about 10 or 11 million bucks.
That's quite a significant amount. I mean, for
I guess. I mean, for a fund manager,
for a fund manager, I mean, what the fund probably in relation to the fund itself, it was probably a small amount.
Yeah, sure. But I was investing in loans, so people knew me as a manager that they could come to that would create passive income for them. So I was an income-oriented fund manager.
But you were working for someone else?
Actually, well, kind of. I was a CFO of a venture capital fund once upon a time. And then I did a spin-off of that company that leveraged some of their branding and infrastructure for me to create my own fund. So yeah, I had a day job, but then that day job led to a side hustle, which was this fund that I was managing, which eventually became the vast majority of my professional time. So I was really managing the fund full time while I was investing in real estate and kind of falling in love with everything that had to do with real estate.
Wow.
So in 2015, I kind of hit an inflection point where I just realized, I love real estate and I have a captive audience of investors. Could I somehow marry these two things together? And so that's where, the next big light bulb moment happened. And really the other, the most significant part of my story is it's very much a story of partnership. So that's when my partner and I came together to form what is now our company. So he had been building a property management business. I was building a fund management business. He was building property management. We came together in 2015 and launched our first real estate fund. So.
Amazing. And I think that's incredible. You're absolutely right in terms of the partnerships, the strategic partnerships. I mean, obviously that came about at the right person, the right time, right? And everything kind of fell into place. But if you could go back and see, where that began. I mean, what was your first deal like when you first started this fund and started this new venture together, which now is called Birgo Capital?
Right. Yeah. It's actually kind of funny. So I'll tell you about our first 3 deals, which are actually very much representative of the fact that we just didn't know what we were doing when we got into this. And that's actually okay. I think we took action, which I think was the key point. But our first fund, the first deal we bought was a 54-unit apartment complex. We still own it and operate it today. It's done actually really well for us over time, but it didn't do well for us for the first couple of years. We really took some lumps, just didn't know what exactly we were getting into. I think, we had some experience with some smaller stuff, and we had some general processes in place from a property management standpoint, from underwriting, but totally different ballgame when you actually get in there and you have an asset and you have tenants and you have repairs issues and you have just all the stuff that actually happens when you're a real estate operator. So that was deal 1. A couple months later, we did deal 2, which was a strip center. And then a couple months later, we did deal 3, which was an office building.
So a lot of diversification there.
Yeah. And we've learned from that. Today, we only do multifamily. But, we realized that core focus matters a lot. Figuring out one thing that you can be really, really good at and trying to be the best in the world at it, as opposed to, jack of all trades. So, had
you done any of those type of properties before? I mean, you mentioned you had a few single families beforehand, but...
Sure. I myself hadn't. My partner had some experience with office and retail prior to us getting into it. But I had to get comfortable with, the basics of how those kinds of deals worked as well. And actually, thankfully, we've done really well on them. So we own both of those assets now too, the other 2, and they're profitable, healthy assets. And the key there was that we got in at a low enough price to where we could make some mistakes and still, have profitable outcomes. But yeah, so first few deals for us were really, reflective of the fact that in a lot of ways we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. We kind of didn't know what we were doing. But again, I would say we took action. We, started to build a portfolio, and it's worked out for the best, just because we were in the game.
Amazing. Yeah. So now take us fast forward to 2021. You guys have or even 2020, right? Pandemic hits. You guys are a vertically integrated company. Now tell me what that means. Vertically integrated, for our listeners who don't understand what that is. I mean, you run a full real estate company. I mean, how many employees does that make up?
Yeah, so our team is about 65 people right now. But most of those are out in the field. So they're maintenance people, leasing, property management, operations. So when I say vertically integrated, I mean, we do everything in the entire investment process, from sourcing deals, underwriting them, capitalizing them, closing on them, and then managing them, throughout the life cycle of an investment. So we do all the property management,
all the construction management as well. Is that included?
Yep. We have, a big team that handles all of that stuff ourselves. So again, I would accentuate the importance of partnership. So I'm not good at a lot of that stuff. Thankfully, I have partners that are. Andrew and Shannon Reichert are my partners. They're a husband and wife team. And we've been partnered since the beginning, and they love overseeing operations and property management and all that stuff. I love thinking about investment, working with capital, working with investors, and thinking kind of strategically about how we should invest. But yeah, so, when the pandemic hit, being a vertically integrated operator, it was both our greatest strength and just frankly a big source of stress, because, we were the ones that were responsible for, are our tenants going to pay rent? Are our tenants okay? How do we keep our buildings safe? Every single bit of, detail that happens within being a real estate operator was our concern. It's not like we were just, calling our property manager and saying, what's going on? We were looking ourselves in the mirror and saying, what's the game plan? How are we going to handle this? So, the second half of March of 2020 was pretty intense. And I'll say for me, on a personal level, my youngest daughter was born March 31st. So, and April was the month where everyone in the industry is wondering, are we going to collect rent? So here 10 p.m. on March 31st, my daughter's born. So we get that out of the way. And then I am immediately wondering, are people going to pay rent tomorrow? What's going to happen? So, super intense time, but especially for people that were vertically integrated. I will say the flip side of that was, we had the joy of being in the trenches with our tenants and helping them make it through. And we have a property management team. Our core purpose as a business is what we call improving lives through real estate. So, we care about everyone in our value chain: investors, tenants, employees, the communities that we have properties in. So, we got to actually roll up our sleeves and get through it together with our tenants, kind of putting ourselves on the same team. So
that's important. I think that, there's been a lot of disregard, I think, for real estate owners as business owners when it comes to, in certain states more than others, but in terms of their, ability to be able to collect rent and things like that. I mean, obviously, if people were shut down and not able to work and they had no money coming in, it was difficult for them to pay rent. But at the same time, there were many, many government subsidized programs for people to be able to collect rent, or at least claim that fact. So you got to stand out in a kind of a world of noise, painting the picture of a real estate owner, as landlords as the bad guys. Was that happening in Pennsylvania as much as it was in other states?
Yeah. I would say though, in general, we tend to be kind of more of a landlord-friendly kind of state. But yes, we focus on the affordable space. So what we call workforce housing, and landlords in, workforce affordable housing just get a bad rep, like they do. We know that. And Sometimes for good reason, but that's not always the case. I think there's just this view of, the landlord as the bad guy. But the reality is that we have expenses to pay, and we have employees, and they have to pay their rent. So like we have to do our job so that the whole ecosystem can work. But I think, the way that we've approached this a little bit differently, I think from most in the industry, is just kind of what I said, putting ourselves on the same side of the table as the tenants. Yeah. Early in the pandemic, there was very much this sort of around the table, like we're all in this together. We heard, our lenders were really, putting themselves in our shoes. And so we in turn would turn around and put ourselves in the tenant's shoes and say, how can we help you? We sought out those programs. If they weren't aware of them, we would say, hey, look, here's the menu. Here's 7 different programs that you can try if you're out of work, to get some coverage for your rent. So right. we just, partnered with them. And instead of viewing it as a you versus me kind of thing, it was, hey, look, let's put ourselves on the same team and see what we can accomplish. And I think that approach is actually pretty effective for landlords. So.
100%. Now you've done this and all of this in building this company, right? We mentioned before over 2,000 units currently under management, all within this kind of ecosystem of your investors, right? That come from friends and families, kind of built up over time through word of mouth. Yep. And yet we met on social media, right? Sure. We connected there, but it seems like you've taken a much more conservative approach when it comes to the use of social media.
Yeah, well, I've been on the sidelines a lot, so like I'm actively engaged as a participant, watching what's going on, but I haven't been as engaged. As a user, or posting or liking or commenting as much as some others. But I am starting to. I think it's a really fascinating world, and this connection, getting to chat here with you today, I think is the kind of thing that for Birgo is going to be much more a part of our future. So right. Our past has been very kind of tight-knit. It's been a very tight-knit community of investors that have been with us, and that's been fantastic. It's gotten us to where we are. But we do view ourselves in the future as wanting to just connect a little bit more with people that we don't know. That was a big theme for us in 2020. We actually did a partnership with a group called Real Crowd, where we opened ourselves to investors around the country. And we went from having investors in maybe 3 or 4 states to now have people in about 25 states around the country. So this is kind of a part of how we want to be engaged, both as a contributor. I think we want to give and receive from the online community of, social media and real estate investors. So excited to just sort of be jumping in and see how we can. We've learned a lot. We've had some successes and some failures, and I think we have a story to tell about that. So we'd love to share what we can with the world and just start to meet people that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. And everyone does have a story. Exactly. And the more you kind of put yourself out there, the more you can share that journey with other people who can relate to that in so many ways. And I think one thing that I relate to a lot in the way that you kind of share your own story as of yet is that you like to call yourself like a dad-trepreneur. Is that how you say it?
Dadpreneur, yeah.
Dadpreneur, right? I'm a proud father of 6 kids myself, and so it's fun to watch, to see others who share that pride and share that joy of parenthood.
Yeah, that is a fun part of life for me. I have 4 between the ages of 7 and 1, and for me, really, like. At Birgo, we believe a lot in what we call living an integrated life. So, there's the buzzword of work-life balance. We, as an entrepreneur, sometimes you just don't have the luxury of, creating those bright lines between work and life. Sometimes they kind of blur together. And we actually think that's a good thing. And if you have passion for your work, then often it doesn't feel like you're working at all. So, like in our partnership, Andrew, my partner, he might be firing off emails till midnight, but he has carved out that time between, 5 and 8 or whatever, where he's just with his kids. And for me, I've sort of identified my own effective work rhythms, and I like to shut it down, at 5 or 5:30, have that time with my kids, and then time with my wife. And then in the morning, I get up super early. So I'm up by 4 pretty much every day, because I know that my kids are going to be up by 6. So I need that little bit of time where I can get some work done and be effective really early before anyone else wakes up. And that's kind of what works for me. But yeah, I love the family life. I love the craziness and madness of juggling, trying to be, fully present at home and fully effective at work.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's
I
awesome.
get it.
Yeah, a lot of us get that, and that's what makes it so much fun. Is that we get to share that with many other people who understand that, and it kind of creates this feeling of community and feeling of togetherness among other people. And that's one of the things I love most about the kind of the real estate community in general, is that even though there's so many investors out there, so many operators, there's a lot of common ground, and there's a lot of kind of shared community in that. And it's one thing I really enjoy. Even though there's still competition out there, but there's still a lot of kind of camaraderie at the same time.
Yeah, and there's enough to go around. I think that's one of the realities in the real estate space. And I think just I'm starting to lean into this more, but networking and being a part of a community, there's give and take. And I think, I think I don't view, it's a competitive market, but I don't view, our space as one that's necessarily cutthroat. I think, there's a lot of real estate out there. There's a lot of capital out there. I think we can all grow and thrive by sort of thinking collaboratively and finding the common ground. Yeah,
absolutely. Where do you see Birgo going in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so we've historically just been a Pittsburgh company, but that's changing for us. So we're really excited about being in a few other markets. We've grown into Morgantown, West Virginia, Buffalo, New York, Cincinnati are now some places that we're looking. We love what we call the heartland. We think that the sort of the Rust Belt is on sale relative to the rest of the country. Mm-hmm. It's just really cheap to buy real estate here, where we are, relative to some of the bigger cities or markets that might get a little bit more attention. So
sure,
we're doubling down on kind of everything that we're about in terms of improving lives through real estate, doing workforce housing in the heartland of America. But I think just kind of growing our borders, hopefully taking some more territory, literally in some neighboring states. And then, for us, because we're vertically integrated, one of the things we have to figure out is how do we be a good citizen in those places? So for us, since we operate, it's not just about, closing on a deal and then owning an asset in a certain market, but it's about building a team there. So we're going to hire employees. We're going to hire property management and maintenance staff. And we have to learn the rules and regulations of what it means to operate in new markets. So
that's interesting. That's really important. I'm glad you brought that up. But there's a lot of people, real estate investors, just kind of hire out the property management. Until you get big enough, it's difficult to have the property management in-house.
Sure.
Right. But for a lot of people who are still on that kind of small scale, under 1,000 units or so, are still just kind of hiring out property managers. So it's a much different strategic approach.
Yeah. And, there's different ways to do it. For us, that was sort of the commitment from day one, was that we really wanted to control everything. And we wanted to be the ones that were accountable at the end of the day for how everything, worked within our portfolio. So, that's sort of been our approach, but there's, lots of ways to make a buck, and doesn't have to be the way to do it for everyone.
Right. 100%. So many different ways. But Daniel, I want to transition now to what I like to call the final four. So these are four questions I ask all my guests at the end of the episode. And the first question for you is, what's the worst job that you ever had?
Well, I'll tell you what, I feel bad answering this way, but I'm going to be honest. So I am an alumni of Ernst & Young, or what is now called EY. So Big Four public accounting. I just didn't like it. It was long hours, and I don't like auditing and accounting. So, great company, great culture. But for me personally, that was even worse than stocking shelves at Kmart in high school or working on Christmas tree farms.
Right.
So yeah, that job, not my favorite.
Yeah, everyone has their beefs with a lot of things, right? But it just goes to show you, right? You can have a great, seemingly, like I'm sure when you were in college, and a lot of people think, if you are going into finance or anything like that, like you have to get a job in the Big Four, right, in order to make it. But even though they have tens of thousands of employees, right, I guarantee like a lot of those people don't actually enjoy it, and a lot of people that have left it kind of speak in that way.
Yeah, and I think it's personality. Like I was a part of a big machine, and I couldn't really impact the outcomes in the way that I wanted. I really want to be sort of running the show front and center, able to impact how things actually turn out at the end of the day. And it's hard to do that when you're in such a big organization.
100%. Yeah, that's so true. Second question for you: what's a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift?
This is probably viewed as a cop-out, but Good to Great, I think for us has informed so much of how we think about, what we do. The concepts of thinking differently about how to build a business. So, and for us, it's not just been about, again, acquiring assets, but it's actually building excellent operations in everything that we do. So early on, I think, really it came from my partner. He read it first and encouraged our whole team to read it. And that's just shaped a lot of the sort of bones of how we think about business building.
That's awesome. No, it's interesting. We have had a couple other people mention that book on this show. I'm trying to remember who it was that mentioned it last, but it's definitely been brought up because it is a great book, and it's something that I think if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend anyone checking that book out. So thanks for bringing that up. It's not a cop out at all. It's a total relative question. Each one of us takes something that we really get speaks to us on our personal level and allows us to change in the way that will allow us to grow in whatever way that is. So to each person, it's totally different. So I'm glad you gave that answer. Yeah. Excellent book. Third question: what's a skill or talent that you would like to learn?
So I'm a musician, but I would like to grow in my musicianship. So one of the things that I'm really big on is healthy avocation. So, having hobbies that are ways to sort of grow and expand our mind outside of the traditional work or the traditional family stuff. I'm always kind of looking for new skills to develop. Right now, I play the guitar and the piano, but I'd actually really like to learn the banjo. So,
wow, yeah, that's awesome.
I like folk music, and I'd love to learn that.
Little bluegrass.
Yeah, I love it.
That's awesome. That's great. I actually, playing the guitar obviously helps you tremendously in order to play the banjo, even though it's a totally different instrument. It's very much related.
Yep. Yeah. It would help. I haven't really dabbled yet, but yeah.
I had a good friend when I was, and this is just a little wise advice trivia. I mentioned this once before, but I actually was in a little bit of a band in high school. It didn't really go anywhere, but I recorded one album. Anyways, the guy who was the lead guitarist, he was probably the most talented musician I've ever known, and still to this day. He blew my mind. He played guitar like nobody's business. It was crazy. And one day we went into a music shop, and he just picked up a banjo, and he was like, "Oh wow, I've always wanted to try to play a banjo." Like he had never picked up a banjo before. Like, wow, I'd love to try to play this. And all of a sudden, he starts playing it like he's an expert.
Wow, that's so cool.
I was just blown away. This guy's
that's
talent.
Really, really cool. Yeah.
It took him a minute or two, and he got the hang of it. Just and the whole thing.
That's awesome.
Man. Anyways, fourth and final question for you, Daniel. What does success mean to you?
Yeah, I think, for me, success means that we actually live out our core purpose, which is improving lives through real estate. So providing value to everyone that's a part of our ecosystem. That's investors, tenants, employees, and the communities in which we invest. If we're doing that, then we're having success. And that's at least on a work level. I think we could talk about success much more broadly on a personal level, but how I think about it in the work context is definitely, achieving our core purpose. I think having a why and going after that why ruthlessly and making sure that you achieve the why is what success looks like for me.
100%. I mean, that's kind of the destination, right? And seeing the goal of getting there. But let's turn that, if you wouldn't mind, like, what's the personal success?
Yeah. Well, I think it's living an integrated life well. So I think about, my family and the people that I have an opportunity to impact. I do some work with people in third world countries that I want to see, them have a better standard of living. So, investing heavily in their well-being. My personal home tends to be a little bit of a revolving door of people who need a place to stay. We've got some people staying with us now. So, having a deep impact on my community and on the world around me is really what success looks like for me on a personal level.
That's amazing. I appreciate that. That's a beautiful answer. And, I wish you a tremendous amount of success, both in your professional and personal goals going forward. And, where can our listeners find you or reach out to you, Daniel?
Yeah, they can find us on LinkedIn, Birgo Capital, or our website, Birgo Capital. They can feel free to reach out. Again, happy to just be a part of this network increasingly and see how we can add value to people's lives. So Thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. I really enjoyed it and wish you continued success as well.
Oh man, yeah, thank you. That's quite the message I like to share with my guests as well. So I appreciate that. I'll just echo that. I appreciate you spending the time with us today. And to our listeners, thank you again for joining us on another episode. And remember, the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn. Send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.